Hey, everybody. Greetings from New York City. I am Dr. Ruth Gotian. I am a social scientist who studies extreme high achievers, those Nobel Prize winners, astronauts, Olympians, and NBA champions. One of the things that I've figured out that they all have in common, that you can do too, is that they all surround themselves with not one, but a team of mentors, people who believe in them often more than they believe in themselves. This is so important that I teamed up with Andy Lapata in the UK, and together we just came out with the new book, Financial Times Guide to Mentoring. We talk everything about mentoring. And what's the best advice that I got from my mentor? Do something important, not just interesting.
Ooh, do something important, not just interesting. So when did you get that advice?
I got that years ago. I was 43 years old when I decided to go back to school to get my doctorate. And it's weird, right? Who does that, right? And I spoke to my mentor about it, who never questioned it. But when we were talking about what I would study and what I would do my dissertation on, I told him what I want to do. And he essentially told me with those 6 words, do something important, not just interesting. He told me that I was thinking too small. And with those 6 words, I changed my research from being an institutional study to a global study. That led to my last book, The Success Factor, all the work with the Nobel Prize winners and astronauts and all those people, as well as the latest one, the latest mentoring book.
Wow. Wow, that is awesome. That is quite a pivot. So were you scared to listen to that though? Weren't you thinking, well, doggone it, that's I'm good.
I think, the learning starts where the comfort ends.
Mm,
And it was my mentor's role to push me out of my comfort zone. Doing an institutional study, which I found very interesting, was safe. And nobody's really interested in safe. Safe is not going to change the world, it's not going to change anyone. And if you want to leave this world better than you found it, which I really do, I can't change the whole world, but I can do my part. And that starts with making the study global. 6 words changed my life.
wow, that is awesome. Well, congratulations on your last book and congratulations on this one. This is the book
Thank
that
you.
I've been fortunate enough to read. I certainly enjoyed it. So tell me, Ruth, mentorship, define it. How do we level set here?
A mentor is somebody who is your guide by your side. They push you, as I said, out of your comfort zone. They likely have experience, but not necessarily in what you want to do. They open doors for you that you did not even know existed. They can help take your career to the next level, but also they are your cheerleader because not every day is a great day. And sometimes you need somebody who gives you that perspective and cheers you out of your funk in order to propel you forward. They are able to see things 6 steps ahead where you're stuck where you are right now. Maybe you only see the next step and they help you strategize a way to get there. That's what I see a mentor.
Wow. So you talked about strategy, not just tactics, not just, hey, here's
Right.
64 things you can do. Why is that strategy so important when we talk about mentorship?
Because you have to be thinking about the long term, not here's the next thing I need to do. Because if it's always here's the next thing I need to do, you're going through life as a to-do list when you should be thinking ahead. But sometimes we don't know how far ahead we can look because we don't even know what's out there. We don't know of the options that exist. And frankly, the options that exist may change over time. And knowing how to pivot with those changes is so critical. And that's why having a mentor is so important.
Wow. Wow. So with that, that does sound supremely important. So why is it even more important for women to focus on this than men? Because for me, I feel pretty fortunate. I've had a bunch of mentors, but I don't know that they're formal. But certainly I've had some great cheerleaders. But from the research that I've read and the work that you've done, right, that it said that that's even more important.
Yeah, look, if it's a formal mentoring relationship or informal mentoring relationship, I don't really care. I think that's not as important as having that guide for you. There's so many reasons that women in particular need mentors who also take on the roles of sponsors as well. One of the reasons is, look, we all know the research that those who are mentored out earn and outperform those who are not. They make more money, they get promoted more often, they have lower rates of burnout. It's those mentors who can say, Sally or Joan or Michelle, you have been sitting in that chair for too long. Time to throw your hat in the ring. Now, we know the statistics that the women will not apply for a job unless they meet 100% of the criteria, while the men will apply if they meet about half. Well, you're never going to meet 100% of the criteria. I had the fortune of interviewing the CEO of Indeed, who told me those are wish lists. Those job descriptions are wish lists. They are never going to meet all of the criteria. So someone has to say, Ruth, throw your hat in the ring. You have enough. You have enough to be considered seriously. And then they help prep you for those meetings to make your candidacy top level. So we need people like that. But I will say that, and this is the challenge that women in particular have, very often women are looking for other women to be their mentors. Now that's great because they understand you and they can empathize and all of that, right? They've been where you've been. They are where you want to be. The problem is, one, it's a issue of numbers. What does that mean? We know that there are not so many women in those high level roles. So if it's only women who are mentoring other women, when are they going to do their actual job? Right? Their job is at risk if they're spending all of their time mentoring, and they will burn out, and then they're not going to be in that role. So we're going to have even fewer numbers, and it's this really bad cycle. The other thing is, if women are only listening to other women as mentors, that's a problem because they're going to be in an echo chamber. And you need to hear perspective of people who are different than you, different jobs, different genders, different cultures, different races, all of it, because you don't know what you don't know. And something that you are having a challenge with might have been solved in another industry. So you need to speak to people who are different than you, and that includes a different gender. And an example that I like to give is, if you've ever had surgery and you were in an operating room, the operating room has a checklist, right? Before the surgeon ever holds a scalpel, there is a checklist of everything that must happen. Well, where did that idea for checklist come from? And it was done to avoid mistakes in the operating room. Well, that idea for a checklist didn't come from another operating room. It came from the aviation industry. Pilots, before taking off, have a checklist of all the things they must do before takeoff. So those ideas to solve a problem in healthcare, they turn to aviation. That same reason why we need to look at other people who are different than us as well to guide us and to give us that perspective. And very often from that numbers game, they're in the senior roles. And I have interviewed countless senior women, from CEOs to astronauts to Nobel Prize winners, and they all mentioned that they had a diversified mentoring team that included people who are like them and people who are not like them.
Well, how do you find those people that are not like you? I mean, they're not typically hanging out in the same places you are. They would be more like you. So how do we find them, Ruth?
Well, I think that's part of the issue that you mentioned right there, is you need to start looking at not your usual places. If everywhere you're going, right, which is your work or the kids' PTO meeting or your house of worship or the gym, it's going to be people exactly like you. It's from your neighborhood, it's from your workplace. You need to start looking at other industries and crossing those invisible boundaries, because that is where you will truly learn. Are there lectures? Are there conferences? Are there webinars? Because you can do this online as well, right? There's so many other places. Look at your friends and who they're working with and who they can introduce you to. There's so many places. There's actually an article I wrote early on in the pandemic in Harvard Business Review about how to find a mentor when you're stuck at home. And these are really all the ways that you can meet people and have it cross those invisible boundaries. And even if you are working remotely, you can find mentors from all over the world.
Wow. Yeah, I love the informalness of that, right? The opportunity there. I mean, you could be a mentor of mine,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
I could read your work, I could read your books, I could see what you've done, look at your research, and then maybe reach out now and then just to get some clarification. But is that still mentorship?
It is, and remember, we don't need to worry about the label, right? If it's somebody who's helping you, then that's really mentorship, right? We have enough labels in our lives, so I'm not worried about adding another one. And, the funny thing is I know you had my co-author, Andy Lapata, before. Andy and I had not met in person until after we submitted the book manuscript.
Wow.
And we were working on the book at that point for 2.5 years. We hadn't met in person. And I can tell you, I think what Andy and I have is peer mentorship, right? I learned so much from him, and he says that he learned from me as well. And I didn't say, Andy, now I'm going to teach you a lesson. No, it was through the work that we did, right? I'm an academic. So if I am making a claim in this book, I said, Andy, it's got to be backed by research, not anecdotal experiences, not hand wave, not smoke and mirrors. I need to know that there's research backing up these claims that we make and that the research held true over time. Yes, we did. And I think Andy is great with the creative and anything tech and anything with the power button. And he started creating infographics and score apps and all kinds of things like that to help drive the message of the book across and all the lessons that we have. And then I said, Andy, why don't we write articles about different lessons from the book? So we started to do that. So we were bouncing ideas off of each other and learning from each other all the time. And as after a while, we started talking in one voice. And I knew what he would say, he knew what I would say. I let him work on what he was so good at. He let me work on what I was so good at. And we did this without ever meeting in person.
So how did you get connected in the first place even? That's so interesting, right?
It's a
Because
wild story, right?
there's there's not a lot that would say that you would be in the same circles that you would finally intersect.
Yeah, especially since I live in New York and he lives in London.
That's right.
um, so I am an extrovert, 95% extrovert. I need to be around people. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I was in quarantine because I was traveling, and that was rough. Um, and Andy and I have a mutual friend, Dory Clark, who has written many,
Oh
many
yeah,
books.
Dory. I love Dory.
I love Dory too. And she took, at that point, Andy had a book called Connected Leadership, and I have a doctorate in leadership. So I said, oh, that's cool. And she held up the book and she said, congratulations to my friend Andy Lapata and his new book, Connected Leadership. So I reached out to Andy and I said, oh, this sounds fascinating. I studied leadership, I teach leadership. Um, this book sounds fascinating. And, he's Europe's expert at developing professional relationships. So I said, networking and leadership, this literally, it had my mind buzzing. So I connected with him on LinkedIn. Now, he does not accept all LinkedIn requests. He said, basically, why do you want to meet with me? And I said, and then I explained that whole leadership. And that led to a Zoom meeting. And that led to other Zoom meetings. And that led to, all of these conversations we had over the years. And then he reached out to me one day and he said, look, the Financial Times has the series. I want to do one on mentoring. I have a big piece of it. You're a mentoring expert. You have a big piece. I think our pieces would be bigger and better if we combine them. Are you game? I said, sure.
Cool.
And that's how it led to that.
So really, you kind of had to raise your hand and say, "I'm looking for
Yeah.
you. Let's talk. Here's why."
Yes.
And
It
that's
definitely, I think the mentee has to take initiative.
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So how do you find that perfect mentor then, Ruth?
There's no such thing as perfect.
Oh, come on. Really?
There's, are you perfect?
Well, sure. Oh, I mean, no, no, not at all.
There's no such thing as perfect, which means you're never going to find the perfect mentor because nobody is the same age as you, same cultural upbringing, religious upbringing, societal upbringing, but you can get the idea of perfect by surrounding yourself with a mentoring team. And the mentoring team has different facets that you can connect to. And the more diverse that mentoring team is, the better. So you want people from different industries. You want people senior to you at your level, those peer mentors we talked about. You want people who are junior to you because they can teach you something. That started at IBM years ago. So you have that diverse team together. That will create that perfect mentoring team. So whatever your question, you have someone on your mentoring team that you can go to who can give you guidance and help set you on that path of that answer.
Wow. So you mentioned kind of that mentoring uh, down, I guess, right? Mentoring to somebody that is less experienced than you. How do we,
Mhm.
how do we do that without really I guess without it making it seem like you're kind of coming in to mentor them?
Well, you mean how does someone senior mentor somebody who's junior or someone junior mentor?
How does someone junior mentor up?
Look, I am mentoring a, a Nobel Prize winner, right? I never, I'm not going to win a Nobel Prize, right? That's not on my horizon. But he came out with a book and he doesn't know anything about book marketing. And everyone who he knows is a scientist or in that industry. And he said, "You know about marketing a book to bestseller status." I said, "Yeah, I've done that." He said, "Help me. How do I do that?" And that's what we've been having so many discussions about.
Because it's
So it can
all
be done.
yeah. So you've got something. It's the key is you have to have something that that person needs in order to make
There's
that
always something, but
right.
there's always something.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So let's talk about the flip side of that. So why does mentorship fail? Why doesn't it work?
I think there's many reasons. One is the mentor may not have the time. There's not enough dedication to it within the organization. They say it, but it's really lip service, right? They don't reward the mentors in any way. There's not dedicated time. There's nobody holding anybody accountable, which can also mean holding yourself accountable, right? And those are the passive ways, but there's also some of the more outrageous ways when I call the mentor turns into a tormentor, which means they are giving the mentee busy work instead of stretch assignments. They are holding key information back because they're afraid of collaborations that somebody will try to poach the mentee, right? Or the mentor is just too busy to respond to the mentee. These are all kinds of ways where the mentor turns into a tormentor.
Wow. Those sound horrible. How do
They
how
are.
do we how do we sniff that out before that even begins? Are there questions that we can ask or things we can be aware of before that happens?
So I think it's hard. But I think what's important, and this is, when Andy and I talk, when we do these, workshops all over the world about mentoring, and organizations say we want to create a mentoring program. I said, that's great. I said, here's a few things. The mentoring matches, I have yet to see an organization where they work
Mm.
because they're completely random. It's like saying, Phil, you wear glasses. Ruth wears glasses. Therefore, you should be each other's mentors because everyone who wears glasses is the same, or everyone who went to the same alma mater is the same, or everyone who works in marketing is the same. That's not true. So you can't make these matches that are current, that are just so random. I believe in having small teams. I think that's much better. I think it allows it to be scalable. And then if we're both mentors and you're busy this month with a deadline, I can take over and mentor the team. It allows the mentors to learn from each other and the mentees to learn from each other and to learn from more than one mentor. It also allows for more people to be mentored as well because the groups can be larger. Number two, I think what organizations need to do, which they fail to do, is to have a predefined exit ramp.
Oh,
If you're my mentor and it doesn't work out for whatever reason, we don't gel, there's no chemistry, you don't have the time, you're not interested, whatever, there needs to be a no judgment way that I can leave this professional relationship and find another mentor, no hard feelings. And that needs to be part of the process. And there's not usually a process. And I think by having these things in place, not to punish anyone, but I'm not going to get along with everyone who wears glasses. We're not going to gel. So we need to find people that we connect with. And the other thing is, even if you are my mentor and you're great now, what happens after a while where I reach a goal? Now I need a different kind of mentor. So I need to be able to make this a living, breathing mentoring team, right? Being a mentor is not a life sentence. You should be able to flow in and out of a person's life.
Very good. So we need a prenup. I got that, right? We can, well, I mean, well, that's kind of what we're talking about here
Well,
is
yes and no, because, and this is where Andy and I disagreed. Um, I We only disagreed on two things in the whole book, and this is one of them. And I am not a fan of those contracts. Some people mentor mentees, they have contracts, and for some people, it's great. They like it. They like the structure. They like things spelled out. I am not a fan because who enforces this, right? And when there's no enforcement, we just wasted a lot of time putting this together. And I'd rather get to work, roll up our sleeves, and make it happen.
that makes sense. Okay, so it's not really a prenup, but at least an exit plan. I get
That's
that.
right.
That's important. So with that, you talk about all that. Can we or should we pay a mentor? Andy had some thoughts on this. Is this the other thing you disagreed with?
So that was the second thing.
Yes.
That was the second thing. And what I have learned, so we didn't go head to head. We had a lot of discussions about it. And one of the things that I had realized, and Andy and I both realized, was that there's there are cultural differences with mentors, for example, in the United States versus in Europe. In Europe, often mentors are paid, where in the United States, they're not. So if they're not paid, to all of a sudden say, okay, in the United States, you now need to start paying your mentors, that I don't know that I have that kind of power. But there are other things that we can do. We can include it as one of the points when we talk about promotion. Has this person mentored? What has happened with the people that they have mentored? Are they in the same role or have they started to really progress in their careers? One of the people who I interviewed was Dr. Bob Lefkowitz. He won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2012, and he has mentored, excuse me, well over 300 people in his career. Now, when he got that phone call at 4 o'clock in the morning in October of 2012, he says, "You won the Nobel Prize." Now, the Nobel Prize is usually shared by up to three people. And he said, "Well, who did I win it with, right? Who's the co recipient?" And he was told the name. And it turns out that was his mentee.
Ah, cool.
And I said, "Dr. Lefkowitz, is that strange that the biggest award in your career you are now sharing with your mentee?" He said, "Strange." He said, "It's a badge of honor. That means that I mentored him well. The way I measure my success is not the awards, it's by the success of my mentees."
Wow.
Let that sink in.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So that's so interesting and so powerful. So with that, how do we get started on this mentorship journey, Ruth? There's so much we could do. We covered a lot of ground today. How do we get started on the journey?
I think the first thing is you need to figure out what is your goal. Figure out what is the goal, what are the things you need to do to get there, and then figure out where are the gaps in your knowledge. Then see who is able to help you f- fill in those gaps in your knowledge and start to seek them out. It's either through introductions, or maybe they're on social media, or maybe you heard their lecture and you start to talk to them and start to comment on their posts. Not so much that you're stalking, but that after a while they will know who you are. And if you start to do that, you can start developing relationships with those people. Look at the way that Andy and I started collaborating.
Awesome. Awesome. So your book is fantastic. If folks hold it up for
Yeah.
us one more time there, Financial Times Guide to Mentoring, a complete guide to effective mentoring with Ruth Gotian and Andy Lapata. So great stuff there. But how do people get more from you? How do they connect to you?
I am all over social media. It is just my name, Ruth Gotian, Gotian. You'll see there's a lot of articles that I'm writing about mentoring. Andy and I just had one in Fast Company on Friday. Yeah, go check out on social media, just my name. Also, you can read more about the book and download a chapter for free at mentoring-guide.com. On there, on the resources, you will see a button. If you want to see how healthy your mentoring relationship is and how effective it is, go click on that button under resources and you will see a link to the Square app.
Very good. Mentoring-guide.com is the website. Check it out and get to know Ruth. Ruth, you have so much great stuff. This was so good. Congratulations on your book once
Thank
again.
you.
So great.